Welcome to the Crypto Gaming Institute podcast, episode number 58. I'm your host, Ben, and today we have the Shrapnel head of studio and game, Mr. Don, Mr. Colin. How you guys doing today?
Good, Ben. Thanks for having us, man.
Yeah, good, Ben. It's good to meet you.
Yeah, likewise. And really excited to chat with you guys. One of the most anticipated AAA multiplayer shooters coming up is, I think, what people have infused mind with Shrapnel. Would love to really understand kind of how you guys got to this space. So maybe we could start off with a quick overview of what Shrapnel really is, and then individual stories of how you really got to this point, and then we can kind of dive from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Colin, you want to kick off?
Yeah, so I start by saying that the team has a pretty extensive background in AAA publishing, and specifically international distributed AAA publishing, which during our current times, really we think pushes us way further ahead than everybody else at this point. We've got our core competencies building up in the studio now, which we're really excited about. Like, we're moving at a lightning pace, but we're also standing up all of those other partners that are going to help us move better at quality sooner, right? For the game itself, we're super excited about it. It's an extraction-based shooter that we're going to marry with what we consider the most promising part of the crypto space. And so this is just like things people are doing in games already, but with some of the sharper corners sanded off. So it's just this really interesting creation, play, evaluate community experience that we think is just going to land at the perfect time a few years out.
Yeah, I think, we always had this twinkle in the neon halls of the kind of time of mods back in, we're aging ourselves, I guess, at this point, but mods back in the shooter days, before kind of the Minecrafts and the Roblox of the world took over that kind of creative funnel, and we're seeing what those types of personas and personalities kind of aging up and not really having anywhere to go it's just kind of sandboxy things. So that was really where this whole marriage of the kind of extraction shooter space and useful player creator tools came from. The blockchain side of it was for us just a completely natural evolution and marriage of what we consider to be the most promising, future-looking technology and kind of decentralized expression applied to what we think is a perfect fit of style, and a perfect fit for how communities engage and what they're going to expect in the future. So that's, it's kind of our journey on top of just the kind of AAA production and studio building background that Colin's talking about that led us to Shrapnel specifically.
Yeah, and we really do think that the composition of this team is sort of singular in its ability to do that. Like, we've shipped our games, we've got the action game experience, we've got the AAA experience, and to deliver at the quality that we're talking about, the sort of experience that we want, is going to be really, really hard. But we think there's enough sort of collective muscle on the team that we can do all the complicated things at the same time and get it out the door when people expect it.
So let's get specific. Where has the team really come from as far as past game experience or game building experience?
You name it. Yeah. Pretty much. Pretty much every franchise, from the Halos, Star Wars, Madden. I did sports stuff for a while as well. BioShock, Call of Duty, all of the, it was all AAA franchises that we did in the past. So it's good to develop that muscle, and you have to keep exercising it, right? Like, times change, people expect more and more, and you need to both meet expectations and then exceed them. So that's been that kind of constant evolution and exercise of that muscle over time for us.
And I think for most of this team as well, there's always this idea of some future facing tech element. So back in the old publishing days, it's that used to mean mobile, it used to mean DLC, it used to mean what does mobile DLC even look like? That was back in the day when it was should everything be pay to win? We don't know, because this is brand new. That goes into the Connect days. It goes into
depends what country you live in. Yeah.
That goes into game streaming as well. So there's always doing whatever you're doing on hard mode, right? And I think one of the interesting like bits of detail we can throw on that too is the core group of founders. We were actually brought together at HBO to like explore games in that space, which at the time it sort of led us to a lot of AR, VR. So it's always that it's making the thing at quality. It's always got to be good enough, hard stop, but with something interesting and compelling on the tech side. And so to loop back to Don's earlier comment, like for us with crypto, that's just peanut butter and chocolate, right? Like it's rewarding true tested behaviors that we know people dig and we know people are going to play. And then just saying like, hey, you had a really good run today. If you want to pull that out and get a pizza with it, you can. That's a really simple, awesome, straightforward argument, you know.
And all gamers love pizza, so that's just
They do.
But you know, just to kind of round out this part of history, you know, just kind of, I want to read a little bit of your bios because I just want to make sure everybody knows the quality of actors we have on the show today, being you gentlemen. But you know, you guys are an Emmy award-winning team, and seems like you guys are spun out from HBO Interactive, and you've had some past successes working on as part of the group of Xbox, Electronic Arts, HBO, LucasFilm. I'm working on things like Halo Duty, Star Wars. I mean, that's amazing. That's exactly what the crypto gaming space has been looking for, are for really talented people like you guys to come in and, you know, show us what a really fun game actually looks like, because damn it, we need it. We're looking for it. We want it.
Well, I think the thing with that too is like, you know, sometimes you see like larger players in this space trying to enter in crypto, but it's different. You know, it's a different structure, and you know, the timelines that we are used to working with are a lot longer, and it's like we need to learn the behavior to get that a little bit closer to crypto. So what we've been learning, like as we were in the early days of development, is just you can't be precious with it. Everything goes out early because that's what you guys expect. But there's a way that we can do that moves our ship in the right direction too, and it's actually like a really cool and thrilling way for us to develop because we've never done it before. You know, like usually we disappear for 5 years and then a game falls out and people either play it or they don't. With this, it's like that constant community touch point, like we believe really strongly, is going to make the game better, right? And it's going to give more of it over to the community. You know, we're just excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, it's definitely, like, you know, you cannot underestimate the community aspect of it. It was one of the major attractions of just how creative people are, how much they engage with each other. These, you know, little kind of ad hoc social networks that build around specific projects and ideas and storytelling. Like we definitely saw that as a way that should be explored and a new way of going through these projects. And we spent a long time when we first were kind of devising what the Shrapnel shape would look like, just making sure that we were cemented as much as possible. They were, you know, part of that community, so that we understood it from the inside out, not just as a like, hey, we're a business unit and we need to analyze the sector. You know, we want to like be part of that.
Totally. So let's kind of understand, and I want to touch back on this idea of, it's like develop, ship, collect feedback from the community, rinse and repeat, with obviously significant more complexity than, you know, I boiled down in the last 15 seconds. But let's actually take it from the perspective of the game you were trying to build. Like maybe you can, you know, people like to draw from past, you know, the legacy system, the Web 2 world of gaming. Be like, this is the blank of crypto. Are you guys trying to draw like a couple of different sources here? It seems like you have the moddable builder piece, but then the shooter piece, so that, you know, comes to mind. Like if you could say like a mixture of this, and this, or just something to hold on to understand like what it can be, what would that be?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the community engagement piece, we like to tip our hat at something like Star Citizen, where those guys are on it every single day, and it's a conversation with the community, right? So it's not get ready, we're going to drop a press release 2 weeks from now. They are in it constantly, and that's a lot closer to sort of size and shape that we're going to be thinking of. In terms of what that actually means, people get to put their hands on. We are aggressively bringing that forward, right? So in our space, what would normally happen is a demo goes out or some sort of vertical slice at a convention or something. We're talking about taking real functional gameplay modules that we're developing and QAing and play testing in-house and getting that out early. Because the truth of it is, for people to hang out with us through the course of development, like we just need to give you something to do. Like it needs to be cool for you. And so, we'll speak more to it a little bit later, but we've got this idea of modules that go out that sort of continue to tell the story of the gamer, and all of that stuff accrues and collects so that when the thing goes live and we turn the Christmas tree on, all of that comes with you, and all of that time you've invested in it, all that stuff that you care about, it's there for you. It's in the game. It allows you to vote on X, Y, and Z, and you feel like a real participant in the community, and that the things that you do matter. Right?
Yeah, I would say from a community aspect, because I think there was like two pieces of this question, and I'll give my own interpretation of what I thought you were asking. But from the community aspect, I think like blockchain space is unique in its ability to incentivize participation, and utilizing that in a very real way through our development process and how we communicate and the type of feedback that we get and how we engage people. We're taking very strongly to heart, and I think it's only possible because of the way these communities form around different protocols. So I think the other piece you're asking is more like if we were going to kind of put a title map on what we could most closely compare ourselves to. Is that kind of like what you're asking? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we do that a lot, right? A lot of the like initial creative process when you're first developing a game is sort of getting everybody aligned on like which games are we close to, and certainly when you speak in design sense, it's hard not to compare yourself. We're the Dark Souls of this, or whatever it is. We definitely toss around the words Escape from Tarkov and the words Division Dark Zone, which a lot, which are granted are like very different ends of a spectrum. But Tarkov is has a lot of rough edges, I would say. We would use the term like it's almost player hating to a certain degree, and there's a lot of AAA polish to be had in there, and that is a very like user experience centric approach and methodology of how do you spend your time, what gets you excited, is this amount of session time appropriate, or do we go for something more compressed where you have more action, and finding the magic. It's somewhere in that dimensional space, and Colin will probably shoot me when this is over.
No. Well, I think like the interesting question there, though, is like when we have the comparables conversation, but then what happens with real value, right? And so all of those behaviors that we were able to take for granted for 25 years of shooters, are they going to be the same? Will they be a little bit different? Will they be completely different? So when Don starts talking about focusing on that player experience, that is the question. Like that's the real deal, right? Where if I've got something of high value, do I want to bring that into a play session, or do I want to be precious with it? It's like, well, we want you in the session. Like we want you to play with your cool shit that you found. So so then it becomes, what are mitigation strategies before the game, during the game, and after the game, so that it always feels fair. It always feels like if you got your treasure, you deserve it. It always feels like if you had your treasure taken from you, it was a skill-based thing. You understand
why.
Yep. And then you get to go in and get it back. So it's if it does get too punitive, where it's like you weren't good enough and the game hates you and you just lost, X number of Shrap worth off of these weapons that you brought in, it just, it's not fun. That's not a compelling Friday night, right? But if we can say,
you don't want to grind out for like 12 hours and then 15
and
seconds
then it's all gone.
Goes away, right? You're like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it just, we want you to feel like, oh, like I'm going to go back in and get my stuff, not like, this game is homework. I don't want to do it,
Yeah. I mean, there's this element, we talk about this a lot internally too. There's this element of just stress, right? And you look at a game like Left 4 Dead, which very explicitly measured the stress, like their whole AI director of how the zombies came at you and everything. They effectively watered down to one variable, which was how much damage are people taking. And if you weren't taking enough damage, like over time, as this kind of curve went up, then they would pile stuff on you. And in that way, they're creating this orchestra of stress and relax and stress and relax. And when we talk about like what Colin's talking about, which is like there's a whole other level of potential stress here, we have to be very cognizant of not cranking that up too much and giving people breathing room in inappropriate cadence.
Yeah, it's almost like tension versus anxiety, right? Because like one of the reasons we like leaned in the direction of this sort of game type is that those are the most thrilling experiences I've had in FPSs in a long time. Like we've played a lot of shooters, but it's, you kind of get the old spark back where it's like, oh, this is real. Like there are going to be consequences to this. I need to step it up. And so what we're trying to do is build sort of more of those organic moments into the actual structure of the game. Don's tired of hearing me say it, but from a design perspective, the thing I love the most is when everybody has a goal and then something flips and now there's a different risk reward, right? So like, maybe we decide to team up midfield and then it's like, oh, nope, something happened and now we're returning on each other. Or is it the opposite? Where, we've been lone wolfing it for a while, but now we have this opportunity for a greater haul if we team up. We don't want that, we don't want the community to have to find that. We want to build it into the game types and start building those different moments into, the different paces of extraction so that you get these really awesome, Black Hawk Down moments with that fun amount of anxiety, right? Where it's like, oh, I need to get over there in time, not I'm afraid to move because I'm going to lose all my stuff, right?
Exactly. So let's kind of talk about this idea of using the new innovation and baking that into your game in a like it's powered by blockchain, right? So I'm not sure if blockchain native or more crypto native can help enlighten me, because there are different aspects to those things. I do think they're but not the same thing. So maybe you could talk about like how did you come to the conclusion that we needed blockchain as part of this, and we wanted to build with this new technology as opposed to going doing something else and just using some of the pieces of technology that existed.
Sprinkle 1 little minute on, and then like Don can give you the nerd version. But I think for me, like what that boils down to is like assets are going to need to know about themselves outside of whatever environment they're in. Like that's the answer to the database question, right? It's doing all of those things that a database does really well, but with this added functionality of, does my sword know that it's a sword if I bring it over somewhere else? And obviously it's like, super, super early days for that. But I think when you start thinking about what that means, where it's like, oh, like if you start talking about concepts like provenance, like where has this asset been? Now you're almost talking about leaderboards per asset. It's like, oh, that's really cool. Or like, where has this been? Does this have some really cool legacy information behind it? That's awesome, right? Like all of that dovetails in with what people love about their digital entertainment anyway, right?
Is it my turn now?
Go for it. No, wait, I've got more to say.
I would say that the like touching on what Colin's talking about, the network effect and elements like DeFi, where like we're always seeking in games that maybe aren't just explicit linear narrative games, to enable and understand player and participant expression in ways that like we can't anticipate. And this is a perfect space for it, right? It's like the way people are going to interact, the way people are going to trade, the types of communities you're going to see built around specific elements that we can't anticipate. It's sort of a fertile soil to enable that sort of thing, right? Yes, at its root, we're talking about ledger transactions, right? And that's where the like origin of a lot of this comes from, other than like way back consensus mechanism days. But the decentralized expressions that are being built on top of that, which is why we say blockchain as opposed to crypto, because when we talk about people being able to create their own stuff, their own items in the Shrapnel universe, there's a whole journey of like what you can do with that and what that means to you. How do people find it, right? Like you're going to be a needle in a haystack potentially, and you come in as this new person who's just experiencing the first time, and oh my God, there's this whole community and this group of people, and some of them are just like god tier amazing creators, and I'm just in their shadow, but I need to be able to engage and have a story told some way. And I think there's not just from a community aspect, but when you look at like decentralized expressions, people can be incentivized to participate in things like content discovery, in things like adding health to a network, because they're incentivized to do so because of the stake that they have in things. It's not just the World of Warcraft version of the amount of time that I spent in it, therefore the amount of like gold that I accumulated, and you start getting into that more like there's some elements with games like that with the social aspect, but it's bottled up and encapsulated in in almost entirely the exact format that they decided. And then they go through that process of like, okay, somebody made Wowhead, or they have like their own guild websites. We're going to incorporate some of that 2 years later into the actual title itself. Whereas this allows us to have kind of an approach where that can happen in real time and can happen in a way that allows the community to actually like build it and have it be a formal part of it, without having to go through all those extra steps.
So it seems like, and I just want to make sure I'm really understanding the essence of what you're saying. It's the expression of the player. So the player is trying to express themselves by playing a game, and through the game, through this journey, they develop their characters. They acquire different items. Uh, they earn different accolades and learn and become greater than what they started off as, and that is an expression of who they are, because it's an investment of their time that they've used to carve out this entity, this identity. And that can all be, it's fully decentralized, meaning it exists outside of just this one game. And is that then done through, but let's talk about the vehicle. Well, first of all, let me know if I'm right on that spot. And please correct me if I'm wrong there. And then what's the vehicles that we're doing to actually memorialize this? Are these NFTs? Are these like, how is this being permanentized? Like
Yeah, I'll say we'll have a lot more details for you very soon. Suffice to say, we take a very decentralized protocol first expression. We think of what we are doing as defining this sort of like decentralized utility, and then as Shrapnel as a game and a platform being one of the potential users of that protocol, right? So we are approaching it, and when we say like crypto native or blockchain native, a lot of it is that approach, both like philosophically, the design and the technical architecture approach to it. So I mean, you can kind of spin that internally in any direction you want. But in terms of the details of what those building blocks are, which is kind of what you're asking, we'll have a lot more about that in the near future.
Yeah,
Sure.
I'd say like just to like sprinkle a little bit on top of that too. Like you I think like really thoughtfully described what a player journey might look like. For us, that's the first half. The second half is who you're hanging out with, what that community looks like, and what we're striving really hard to do is make sure that Shrapnel, like the Shrapnel umbrella contains a lot underneath it. The core of which is the game, of course, but we want that full game loop to be: what am I doing before? Who am I talking to? What kind of crew am I getting together? We have our match. What pulled out of the match? How does that contribute to how I present as a player? How does that contribute to how my team contributes? How does that then reflect over onto the UGC piece or on the community voting piece or any of the reputation stuff? Like, it's this idea that what I do over here matters over there. And we're just trying to make that sort of as frictionless as we can for everybody, right? So if you're a UGC kid and you really don't care about the game, we have a place for you, and vice versa. If you love the community interaction, you love really digging deep into it, we've actually got what look and sound a lot like actual game loops designed up and around that. So we will come to you wherever you are and try to give you a dope experience. And we just sort of hang that hat on that core gameplay loop.
Ooh, I like that a lot.
Yeah, man,
like, getting me excited about it.
Like, when you think about like what about this space is exciting, like for me, it's totally like token utility, right? Like once you lift that rock up and think about what that means for people that are really passionate about your space, like you get to go for hours and hours, right? We've been spending the last year thinking about pretty slick ways to get people integrated in and really feeling like when they make a vote, they're making a vote and it matters and it contributes to the greater thing. Right?
Oh, sure. And it even goes beyond. So I see what you guys are talking about, and there are a couple of different ways I could even imagine that y'all would be approaching delivering on these different things. But let's just say there's some sort of token experience. The beauty of that is a token is as useful as the ecosystem that it is able to participate in.
Yep.
And so what I'm kind of seeing as one of the more exciting pieces of what y'all are saying is that y'all are building the ecosystem and sneakily saying game at the same time, but you are a game, but then everything's kind of the game. It's all the same, but then grow over time, and the tokens are not just, it's not just quarters for this one game experience over here in the arcade. It's also everything else you in that ecosystem until the end of time. It still gets you some sort of benefit, and you can still participate from an initial investment of your time, and the expression of who you are can then participate throughout the ecosystem.
Like, I think the responsibility for us is to make sure that like we are where you want to be spending your time, right? Like we are making rad content, fun game loops, and just giving you stuff to do. Because in the space, like it's highly competitive, and there's always somewhere else that you can go. And so for us, it's just about how can we hit as many of those different game player types as we can, and have them feel like what they're doing is meaningful and they're getting their enjoyment out of it, right? So it's very entertainment first.
Yep, and I would say we have a pillar we're not the metaverse, we're part of it, which is kind of to speak to the idea that we are a very specific game, right? We're not the sandboxes of the world, and really that name is like on the nose, but a lot of people who call themselves the metaverse of whatever are basically a sandbox game, right, or sandbox platform. We see when you look like beyond Shrapnel as our responsibility or our like network effect interaction with other platforms, other titles, as being a very important part of it. But we see it like it's we're our own little bubble of that, and we are going to curate like our style and our game and make sure that it's very tight within that space, and not try to be all things at like a mediocre level. Be our thing, like very very high, like premier, like high tier content and style and tone, and then allow ourselves and allow others to be like part of our kind of more interconnected network, as opposed to trying to encapsulate it all in our one big hug.
Dig it. So let's talk a little bit about the actual building process, because it's very different in a Web3 scenario as opposed to anything that, at least personally, that I've seen before this. How did you guys approach having to not only deliver on all of the previous expectations of a fantastic game, but then on top of that, also now you're working with a new blockchain technology and a new type of community experience? Like, how did you kind of meld that all together in a way that you still have the quality before, you still are doing the things that the great that you did before, and bringing that level of greatness and that level of quality, but then also bringing in the new stuff to where if you don't tackle those things appropriately or effectively, like you're wrecked on Spawn.
Yeah, I mean it's even worse than that, right? I would say it's moving rapidly, like just getting caught up to the present, let alone get it looking to the future, is a Herculean task without the game side. So yeah, I hear what you're saying. Sorry, Colin, I interrupted you.
No, it's all good. I would just say that's sort of where we speak to the strength of the team. There's a reason we chose first-person shooters. There's a reason we chose extraction, et cetera, et cetera. Like, you need to give people a certain amount of what they're familiar with so we can start to introduce some of these other concepts in a very, very deliberate way. But when it comes to the actual development of the title itself, that's not us saying like, oh, maybe it's a shooter. Like, I don't know, is it, for us, the perspective we take on it is hyper deliberate and broken out, because we've done it a million times before. So it's, can I walk? How fast can I walk? Can I run? How fast can I run? How long does it take to transition? Can I go prone? How long does that take? What does reloading feel like? To make reloading feel good in a AAA shooter, there are 35 variables underneath it, right? So that's its own deliverable, right? And so we're starting to get comfortable and a little bit more conversant with exposing that up to the team, either through descriptions or AMAs or actually, in the future, playable versions of those things, where we just say, like, here's the deal, guys. Like, this is not a demo that you're playing. This is generating data that our QA and game designers can use to make the gameplay better, right? So it's just this little chunk. It's just traversal for this week. Bang on it. Let us know what you feel about it. We can ingest it. And next week, it's going to be pure shotguns, right? So this is what we're thinking about in terms of spread and reload and how quickly they fall to earth and how powerful they are. We thought it was going to be this, but we made a mistake and we play tested it. And now we're over here. I think, it's tricky to show that level of work because it's all wrong, right? Like, they're just first stab guesses, and we're trying to dial that in and use our intuition and the tools that we have to get there. But yeah, just that the excitement that the community gets from that, that sort of like behind the scenes, VFX reel sort of stuff, that there's a way to turn that thing that feels like a vulnerability into a real strength for us. Like, once we get the positivity of the community behind it.
Totally. Well, I'll just ask, just for gamers worldwide, please make the terrain interactable. Please let me blow up a building and have people in the building die when I do that, or else get seriously injured.
Well, even just the conversations that go into something like that, right? Because my favorite game types they lean a little bit more strategic. So I love the idea of, I know you're behind that wall. Is it a plaster wall? And can the weapon that I have now penetrate it, right? Like, that's a level of strategy that I like. Where that's complicated for us is where the UGC element comes in. Because when you have that kind of gameplay in general, it's so tightly optimized and tightly constructed. We have confidence that we can kind of package those elements up and give them to players in a way that they don't need to worry about it. But it is made much more difficult by the fact that if you drop into a map, I don't know where Toby sprinkled his factories and what I can do in them, right? So the approach that we're taking is, can we sort of model best behavior on how all of these things work, give you the templates that you need for them, you don't have to worry about it, and can we be generally confident that if you drop all of these ingredients into a pot, eventually you'll get soup at the end, right? And it's interesting. It's a lot of the same tactics and the same tool and the same technology, just tweaked a little bit, that really demands the insight that we've had across a million other games in the past, right? Like, avoiding those early potholes is going to be essential for our success and for making sure that the community continues to have faith in us.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Don, did you have a put on that, or we had to move on to the next question?
On destructible environments specifically.
And it's all AI traversable, and you can drive vehicles through them. Dynamic weather systems.
Yeah, dynamic weather, time of day, absolutely. Yeah, so it's it'll run on, and it runs on a Nintendo 64. I come from a background that is heavily technical, so those sorts of what we would consider production creep requests or design creep requests, I'm very familiar with. I mean, I will say, there's, along the lines of kind of what Colin's talking about, there is a journey and a roadmap to how those things come online, and certainly we want people interacting as quickly as possible. So when we look at the classic scoping exercises, as they apply to how things roll out, the timing of how things roll out, and the community's appetite to either get their hands on more quickly or at what stage of doneness they are. I mean, that's a perfect example when you talk about things like destructible environments of, it's like, of course, but like, when and how, and are you going to be angry if you're building a map and then suddenly some more stuff comes out that you can build a new map with, and now it's destructible, right? We want to make sure the community feels like their time is being well spent, right? That they're enjoying what they're doing, that they're contributing back, that they're creating things that they're happy and proud of, and that the community is giving them positive feedback on, and that we're always giving them new stuff that isn't, it's done in a way where it's not going to, like, degenerate their previous efforts as well, right? So it's a balancing act for sure.
Yeah. But it goes back to that modular development thing too, where like that goes from being scary to us to a positive, because like they're there are certain bad behaviors in current game publishing that I think we just do because that's how it's always been done, right? So to use, like, let's say vehicles, right? So normally what happens is a game, at the release cadence we have now, it goes out a little bit too soon, but everything's got to be in there, and the vehicles are fucking broken, and everyone's upset. For us, we have the ability to say, this is V1. These things are on the roadmap. This is why they're not in this version. You're going to see every step of that development. This is the consideration on how those things are going to interact with what you guys have already done, and keep your eyes open because they're coming. We have conversations, like a similar thing about, like, just throw out an example. What would AI feel like? And it's like, well, if we were going to do it over here, it would feel a very certain way. If we were to do it over here, we would do it a very different way. We have the luxury in this case of saying, like, well, let's see how the community bangs on it first. Like, let's not have a feature in there for the sake of having a feature in there. Like, let's listen and say, like, no, this is a thing the gameplay needs. We can prioritize that and stack rank it out the way that we need to.
I love that. I just wrote an article the other day based on a couple of conversations that I've had about different frameworks for building games, and this idea of having a bunch of knobs that you can turn at any time to adjust and rebalance and fix as needed. And one of the kind of theses of that article was the games who build more knobs in a responsible way, not just knobs for big knobs, but the ones that have better longevity and can sustain more over time. Is that something that you guys are thinking about, where you're building a vehicle that can then be adjusted over time, or are you trying to just like test enough experimentation beforehand to where when you then launch, you're like, okay, here's the product?
No. You're talking about a live service methodology, and we all certainly come from that world, as well as the, like, single player narrative experience world. But it's definitely the former, where this is something where tuning will have to be done live, even with the kind of modules that Colin's describing, and having people kind of focus and hammer on and give both subjective and objective database feedback on, like, certain elements. You're never going to nail it, right? You're never going to know until you blend, like, all of the pieces of that soup together, what is 3% off in one direction or another, and you want to be able to make that sort of change without it, even a title update, even without an executable update. That, like, those are the sorts of things you pull from live configuration, essentially, and that becomes in like live operations world, that becomes what we call the war room process, where you're looking at all of the data coming in, and then on a daily basis, literally, like, every morning, you're having a war room quorum, where you're deciding what changes you're going to make, and how you communicate that out, and, like, the timing of it, and then what you expect back. And a lot of times, for gameplay stuff, you can't really do this, but as an example, like user experience, like user UI stuff, you can actually have experiment groups where half the community sees one thing and half the community sees something slightly different, and you can determine if what you did, it actually helps or not, based on what the results are and what comes back. And obviously, like I said, you have to be careful about which elements you're doing that with. You can't do that with, like, the damage on a gun or something like that.
Yeah, that's a lot of sense. So let's kind of scope out a little bit, and all pun intended with the scope, Joe. Let's kind of
nicely done.
Thank you. Let's go out for a second, and let's talk about what some of the most exciting things are to you guys about this idea of crypto gaming, blockchain gaming, metaverse. Like, what gets y'all the most excited, and what are you most looking forward to?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, I already, like, touched on the utility thing, where it's like, can we let people do what they want to do better and in more places? We've already, like, thrown the box around it. Like, we are not attempting to create that metaverse, but I am personally really excited to see where that goes. I think sometimes people hear that and say, like, so what, am I going to have my Mario Kart and control? That's terrible. And it's like, well, no, like, that would be a bad experience, so we're not going to do that. Like, all of those other game types that you really love aren't going away. This is just for certain game types, for certain communities that like to play in that competitive space. It's just giving you more stuff to do, right? So in a world where, for me, it's less interesting to say, like, do I have this exact scope from this game and this one? It's like, well, maybe not. That's up to devs and how the community evolves over time. But for me, it's, can you take that sense of you and have that be meaningful in another space? The fact that you dropped 150,000 hours into like a World of Warcraft session, like, that there should be a reputation to that. There should be a sense of who that person is when they migrate over to another game environment, right? And like, their friends should be able to come with them really effortlessly, and they should all have a pretty decent expectation of what those experiences are going to be like, right? So if we can contribute to sort of putting a little extra polish on top of that and a little bit more production diligence and some real deep thought into it, I think we can make sure that that sort of stays the course in the right direction.
100,000 hours is a very long time. I want to do the math real quick.
You'd still be playing it. Yeah.
That's about 6,250 days.
I feel like I know people that have done that though. That's
roughly 17 years. Would, you better get something out of it at that point.
Oh yeah.
Don, what about you?
I mean, it's kind of the same thing Colin's saying, maybe a little more, like you said, I'm the nerdy guy in the group. So I think it's a little more like at the fundamental level. When I got into blockchain, is just not just like utility tokens, but decentralized expressions. So for, when we look at what we're doing, interop is certainly like interop and transportability and our responsibility to the community and to other like games and platforms and how we can make that work is a huge piece of that. I would say content discovery within our own platform is also a huge part of that I think we're in a kind of a unique position with blockchain expression to actually do something really cool. But that's, all those are examples to say that just we're at this place where fundamental building blocks are being used and reused and expanded upon in really interesting ways. And it's, there's not many times like in your life, especially from a technical perspective, that you get to be part of that. And that, I mean, it gets me excited in a very nerdy way, I guess.
I love that. So guys, I want to be very respectful of your time. I know we're getting close to it today. But let's just kind of, I just kind of want to leave it to you, see like what other ideas you have about the space, about Shrapnel, Metaverse, crypto gaming, this incredible inflection point we're at in humanity and technology. I would kind of love to hear any other thoughts you guys have before we wrap it up.
Yeah, I mean, I think, from an industry level, it's kind of, I don't want to say tip of the spear, because there's definitely those have laid the path already, but being in the space to bring kind of game dev centric, like game design first, and then applying blockchain technology and methodology to it is like the next tipping point that needs to happen, right? There's a lot of product examples, project examples, game examples out there that are, the very, very beginnings of a couple people with an idea that have a very, and I don't want to say indie approach, but even just almost like hobby project approach to what they see as the way people are transacting with each other, and then making a way to kind of gamify it, as opposed to taking this like proper two-pronged approach. I think over the next couple of years, there's going to be a lot of projects in our space, different genres, and hopefully we can continue with the kind of community aspect of like a lot of projects and people who are running them all talk to each other. It's a lot more open, I would say, in the space than it is in traditional game dev. So I'm eager and excited to see kind of how that progresses and if we can kind of keep that spirit going. And then I think the other thing is the new like those new fundamental building block expressions on blockchain. We have like currency and utility tokens. We've got ownership, like the ability to own stuff, right, and transfer stuff. Then we look at kind of like, and this is very game selfish as well, elements like self-sovereign identity, and where that's going to go, and kind of unlinking things from the wallet to having, you having more of like an account persona basis by which we can, when Colin talks about things like reputation and how that follows you, like those are important social elements. So the expression of those is going to be important over the next kind of 2 or 3 years. I think those will be some of the things people focus on very strongly, actually. Seeing where those go from like an industry altitude perspective is going to be really exciting and interesting. And, we want to be part of all of them, basically.
It's exciting. Colin, how about you?
Yeah, I think I'd come at it from like a slightly more selfish developer perspective. Like, we come from a background of like, you work 4 years on a game and then you work another 4 years on the same game with a different number behind it. And this is not that. This is completely like Wild West for us. So we've got all of those skills that we've been spending the last 15 or 20 years developing up and really building up muscle for, but you have to use it in a slightly different way, right? Like, you can't sleepwalk through any of this, whether that's the community engagement stuff, how we make sure we're releasing assets on time, still hitting the quality that we need. Like, everything is just different enough that it's exciting. Like, it's a fun, different way to try to develop. And, what really gets me up in the morning is just seeing how people are going to interact with any of this stuff once we put it out, right? Like, we've been in sort of like armchair theory craft for the last year, like really drilling down deep into a lot of this. So we feel like our models are good. Our interaction models are pretty solid. And, most important question at the end of the day, like, is it going to be fun? And right now it's sort of like, well, yeah. Like, this all feels pretty cool, but you never know until you go sort of weapons hot and release it to the community and people really start to bang on it, So I think there's, like Don had said, like, this just feels like a once in a lifetime opportunity to do it right the first time, be smart, be reactive to what the community needs, have that reflected in the content, and then see what happens when it goes out. I can't think of something comparable that I've seen that's had to run that same gauntlet, right? It's just a cool time to be doing this.
Agreed. I feel very lucky that that I'm here in the space at this time too. I mean, I can't even express it really well. Anyways, guys, I just want to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to come chat, and really excited to see what comes out of everything that you guys are building, and I'm going to destroy some terrain at some point. But
we'll throw it on the backlog.
Put it in the backlog. Yeah. It was really good meeting you, man. I appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, thanks for the time, Ben.
Likewise, guys. And everybody watching and listening, I want to thank you all. Y'all are the best, and I will see you